Hey, welcome everyone. It's a joy to see you all. Just a couple of things starting off. One of the things, if anyone is interested in this, I had an idea where we don't, and I'm not sure how I would do this, so it's a rough idea. But so many of you have so many great stories to tell about the birding that you've done, or what comes to your bird feeders, or the vacations that you've taken. And I was wondering if maybe at some point, like maybe even this semester, but maybe going forward in the future, we try to make that where there's a night that's just like for everyone to share. If you're on Zoom or if you're here, you send photos and like this is what's been in my garden. Or maybe you have a question and maybe we can get myself or better experts answer questions that you have. Or so I it occurred to me that we got such a great set of interests and birding community that maybe going forward we could do that, or maybe even add 1 week onto the end of this lecture series for that. So just an idea, and if anyone had any thoughts, at the end of the evening, I'd love to hear. Because I've heard people talking about like their vacations and Barbara online. I mean, your trip to that, I forget what it was called, the Hawk Valley in South America. I mean, like all of these things sounded wonderful. And Bethany, you take such beautiful pictures, you really do. And so it would be
Thank
wonderful to
you.
share. Bethany's been on a number of our field trips in the past couple of weeks. She takes pictures; they're beautiful. It would just be great to share. So just a thought there. Before we get started, once again, there's just so much great birding going on that even though a lot of our, hi Dorothy, wonderful to see you. So many of our birds have started going south. I was at the Goshen Sanctuary on Friday, where I saw more waterfowl there than I've ever seen, and I've been going on and off for there for like 28 years or so, but like over 400. And when I entered it on eBird, they asked me to check my numbers because they said like for one of them they said no, that's way too high, and I sent them pictures. I said, well, no, here's the 194 green-winged teals that I saw. But it's one never knows. We do live in an amazing area. We're on a flyway for all of Canada's birds going down to their wintering grounds. And then there's things that we just don't know, such as because it's been so dry, will that force birds? Hi, we're running low on seats. We certainly have two left. I just wanted to point those out, and I'll three, and anyone can so much, and I'll run into the neighboring rooms and get more if needed. Um, so there's great things coming on. Unusual birds. On Friday, I saw my first blue-capped vireo that I've never seen before. So the sanctuaries at Audubon are wonderful. The Bashakil it has just beautiful wetland. Sure, sure, sure. Hold on, I'll be right back. Yeah. So if anyone, is that you? You've been having issues with these guys. I'm sorry? Ooh, yeah, they're neat. We'll talk about them um, in just a few minutes. Uh, but there's so many birds which haven't come through yet. Like so with ducks, there are late migrants, like the ringneck ducks, the buffleheads. They're not here yet, and so the fall migration occurs in waves. Not everyone migrates at the same time. So some of these areas, they uh, there's great birds yet to come. So I hope you can get out and hike. I know that a couple of you have said, hey, this, 6.5 station sanctuary in Goshen that you keep talking about, like I've never been there. And on November 6th at 5 to 6:30, I'll meet where the Heritage Trail meets 6.5 station work. The trail, if anyone wanted to take a stroll, I'll have a spotting scope on me. Like I said, I just saw 400 waterfowl there. So we'd love to have you. All right, so I, I, and I apologize this before. I've traveled a bit, and I love the Caribbean. I love the West, but after a while, I mean, it's beautiful, but it's boring. And there's just they don't have the number of birds that we do. Just like the diversity, we really do have just far more than so many people experience, so much so that we've been splitting them into groups. And so where we are now are the songbirds or the perching birds that make up more than half of all birds. Interestingly, in the great family tree of birds, this is the last big group to evolve, and they're the biggest. All right, so we're breaking them into 3 nights. This is night number 2. And originally I organized this and I thought we could end with the warblers. But as I look at the material, I'm thinking that that's going to force me to rush a little this week and maybe have a little time left over next week. So just so you know, I think that I won't get to sparrows tonight. So that I think that next week will be warblers and sparrows. And so that the sparrows, which I was going to squeeze in tonight, I'm thinking, better flow next time. So starting off with this one, oh, you gotta love this bird. I saw a bunch of them on Friday, so they're still in our area. They're called cedar waxwings. Um, they are called cedar because, as you'll see, they love cedar trees when they can find the fruits. And if you're wondering, where could I find some cedar trees? I'm on campus. So the video that you're about to see of all of these cedar waxwings in a cedar tree is actually next to Horton Hall on campus. So, during the winter, you might be able to see something similar here. And the term waxwing refers to sealing wax. And if you look at the bright red there and the bright yellow there, back in the day, when you would seal letters, et cetera, and use the wax, it reminded people of that. So these are beautiful birds, nice, mix of tan and yellow. They've got this nice crest on their head, a black mask. And once again, if you catch the light, they do have these little spots of bright red on their wings and yellow on their tails. 2 birds tonight are unusual in their ability to eat plants. Now, lots of birds can eat plants, like in berries and etc. But not that many birds can get by on only plants. I mean, just like as far as protein sources, we're the same way. We have essential amino acids. You have to eat protein because even if you were eating a lot of carbohydrates from plants, at a certain point, there's something you're not getting from your diet and you need to supplement it with protein. And a good evidence of this is that there's a parasitic bird, which we'll get to, called the cowbird. And they lay their eggs in the nests of other birds so that those birds care for their young. And that works most of the time, but not with goldfinches and not with cedar waxwings, who are feeding their young only fruit. And cowbirds are like most birds that like fruit but need insects for the protein, and the cowbird young die because they're just not getting enough protein in the nests of cedar waxwings. So these are fruit-eating birds to a degree that most birds don't do. So this is on campus. So if you're near the greenhouse, between the greenhouse and Horton Hall, you'll see these cedar trees. And as you might guess, cedar waxwings are known for their love of cedar, quote, fruits, as you can see here. Now, why do we make such a big deal about that? Because they are so good at eating fruits. They can eat fruits that most birds can't. So there are some fruits that are just waxy, that in like poison ivy berries, cedar fruits. There's a bunch of them, bayberry. Great to see you, Magoo. And if we got a chair there, we got a couple more you could grab over here. So cedar waxwings, their digestive tracts allow them to eat fruits that most other birds can't. And so once again, here, if you were to go to Horton Hall, there's berries there, but most birds can't eat those. So the cedar waxwings in winter, when it's hard to get nutrition, there'll be a whole group of them you can see this nice little flock here. And on Friday, there was a nice little flock of them in Goshen. So these are just beautiful, beautiful birds. And while lots of birds are getting as far south as they can because they eat bugs, once again, if the cedar waxwings can find fruit, they'll stay around for a while. So, keep your eyes peeled for these. Now, that's a beautiful little beige color that you see. And if you look at this bird here on the right, you might say, ooh, is that, I don't know, is that as healthy or whatever? Well, one of the challenges that we birders have is that at this time of year, you have the juveniles which hatch this year. And so they're teenagers. They may not look and act exactly as the grown-ups do. So this is a juvenile cedar waxwing. And so when you see them, sometimes you'll just see different, colorations, given that time. So these are more juveniles, and then here are more of the adults. So, beautiful, beautiful bird. We had mentioned vireos, and you had seen a red-eyed vireo. So let's go here. The vireos, I think in general, I can say you may never have seen them, but I'm sure that you've heard them. All right, they're songsters. Red-eyed vireos can sing 20,000 times a day.
Wow.
That's a lot. All right. And so as we look at energy, just like energy spent, if you're going to sit on a branch and not go looking for food, just sing and sing and sing all day long. And red-eyed vireos can do it for a much longer time period than most. So, you can spend weeks where you're just hearing these red-eyed vireos. Now, it's a great name to have, a red-eyed vireo. That's a distinctive trait. But the light has to be just right. For a lot of birds, you're not close enough to actually get the hue of their eye. So you can see it in some of these. All right. But like if the light's not right, you're not going to get it. And juveniles have more of a browner eye. So you should go for other features as well, like that nice eyebrow that they have here, because once again, you might not see the red eye if the light isn't right. They like the tops of trees. And birders like, well, at least I'll speak for myself. I like to try to call birds in by going psh, 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 and a lot of the birds will say, "Who's in my territory?" and come and go after. Vireos tend not to do that. So because they're not responding to that, because they're high in the trees, they're hard to see, but you do hear them a lot. So red-eyed vireos, um, these are great birds. So the question on the speckling, I'm sure it could vary a lot, but I'm sure some of that has to do with camouflage. Like as you're like a juvenile still, as far as evading predators, and as far as having energy, if you could blend in a little bit more, that would benefit you. A lot of the distinctive colorations we know set in once breeding season starts. So juveniles aren't trying to impress a mate. So that might be the reason. The question online was, why do a lot of juveniles have more of a speckling? Uh, Birds change in autumn. So here's the red-eyed vireo, and like I think you can get a little bit of an idea that the eye is red. Um, they love bugs, but in this season when they're getting harder to find, now they're going to hang around and feed more on fruit. And the ones that can do that to a greater degree, they're likely to stay in our area. Behind this bird here is poison ivy, which is producing like waxy berries at this time of year that many birds can eat. But the ones who can, well, this is a good time of year for them, and they can hang in our area and eat poison ivy. And so here's poison ivy, or it's going after the leaves. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Virginia creeper. There's poison ivy there as well. If you ever like spend a lot of energy and like in removing poison ivy from your garden and wonder, why is it coming back year after year? I keep pulling it up. It's because they produce all of these berries that yellow-rumped warblers and these vireos they eat, and then these birds are defecating these on your property. So no matter how much poison ivy you pulled up, there will be more next year, unfortunately. The warbling vireo, to look at it, once again, you might not notice that, but you'll hear it, a beautiful warbling sound. They like treetops, so it's a grayish bird in the treetops. It's really hard to see, right? But once again, you're more likely to hear it. I was thinking at the end I might play some of the song. In past weeks, I've been having some trouble with people at home can't hear them, so rather than just keep stopping, I'll just kind of run through a bunch of them at the end. Um, if it's okay. All right, so we have the warbling vireos. Here you see it eating a bug, caterpillar, but at this time of the year, the vireos are going to go after the berries that they find. And then there are more vireos. There's a solitary vireo. There's a Philadelphia vireo. Like I said, for the first time in my life, I saw a blue-capped, a blue-headed vireo in Goshen migrating through. So a lot of vireos, especially during migration time. And I'd said this before. There are some birds that are just, these are the reasons why we try to learn songs, because you're not going to see them, or they're very challenging to see, but you hear them all the time. So it's worthwhile to either A, get to know their song, or B, use one of those apps on your phone where you say like, oh, here we go, red-eyed vireo again. Here's a warbling vireo again. And that way you can learn the most common. Speaking of common ones, we have a Carolina wren, right? Which I'm sure you've heard. Now, some people feel that it's called one that says Jupiter, Jupiter, Jupiter. Some people prefer tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle, whatever works for you. It can vary a little bit, but this is a song that you've certainly heard, especially in spring, but they can keep it up in summer as well. The wrens, and there's a couple of them, are small birds, but one of the things that makes them distinctive is how they hold their tails upright. All right, so it would certainly help you if you can just kind of glance at a bird, and they can hold their tail upright. I'm not saying that 24/7, that's the position. But more so than most birds, they'll have that orientation. So if you can look at a bird from far away, you can say, oh, I think it's a wren. All right, now obviously you've narrowed your possibilities down, and that's great. And of the wrens, Carolina wrens, they would be among the favorites. They've got more of a warm cinnamon color as opposed to the more brownish gray you see in the other ones. They've got this nice eye stripe. They make that loud song. So Carolina wrens, we like them. They're cute. A lot of the wrens aren't as cute if you were a bird, though, because their nest, they need a cavity for their nest. A bunch of birds are like that, like wood ducks. I mean, wood ducks only lay their eggs in a hole. All right, so they're cavity nesters. And the problem is very often cavities aren't that easy to find. I mean, maybe an old woodpecker hole or whatever, but when you find a cavity, you defend it. And these little birds go after birds much bigger than them and kick them out. All right. And will then go after like eggs of other birds or nestlings of other birds and like kick them out, maybe killing them in the process to make a cavity there. So these cavities are considered valuable resources because that's where they like to nest. The family name of the wrens is Troglodytidae. And if you know that word troglodyte, that's going back to medieval legends of trolls and things like that. Troglodytes were ones who lived in caves. So here's a Carolina wren. Two things in the chat. Does poison ivy not affect birds? No, it doesn't. So some can't digest the waxes in the fruit, but birds don't get the irritation from poison ivy the way that we mammals do. So here is a wren, the Carolina. Another one you're likely to see is a house wren, and I know that in Goshen we've put up lots of bluebird boxes in which we have seen lots of tree swallows and lots of house wrens, and at least personally to date, 0 bluebirds. All right, so if you put up a bluebird box, you may see a house wren here, but once again, it's a cavity, like a hole in a wooden box. This is what wrens like. This is a little less obvious in its coloration than a Carolina wren, but making really long songs, so very musical, even if not quite as colorful. There's 2 more really quick. There's a winter wren, and just want to establish, as I think I've tried to before, is every season is a good season to go bird watching, although you're going to see different things. But winter wrens go in winter or you're not going to see them. All right, so there are some birds that this is their Florida. As birds go south for the winter, this is south of a lot of places in Canada. And so this is their place where they vacation. So there's a list of birds that you're going to see here in winter, but not in spring. The winter wren being one of them. A small bird. Another thing about winter wrens in winter, and we're going to see golden crowned kinglets in 3 birds. They're beautiful birds. In breeding season, they like to be high in trees, like especially in a conifer forest. So to be honest, like they're in Canadian boreal forests, 40, 50 feet up, and there are these little birds flitting in the branches. So you're just not going to see them. But in winter, birds can behave differently. Not only can they look different, they can behave differently. So that winter wren, you wouldn't see it, say by the Bashakill, which is where those videos were taken, in the underbrush by a stream. You would see it high up in these coniferous trees. But in winter, it's not only in our area, it's also acting differently and hanging out in a place where you're likely to see it. We'll see that with the golden crowned kinglet as well. Okay. Uh, this is our last wren. Is anyone impressed by the marsh wren here? Okay. All right. Let the record show for the people at home. No one raised their hand. Um, these these pictures took me a long time to get. There are some birds which are just really, really shy. This one being one. And so I spent hours not just looking for this bird. I was trying to cut down this invasive species, but I was also looking for this bird. So I am in waders in a swamp. And I think sooner or later I'm going to see this. I spent hours and hours, and you can hear it because they're very musical, but they're in all of these cattails, and you can just somewhere in there they're hanging out. I'm very lucky I got these pictures. Just another, note on the birds. Some of them, are easy to see. Others just very shy in general. And seeing this bird is, it's unlikely event. Marsh wrens would be one of them. And as you might imagine, their name implies this habitat. They like marshes and swamps. And you can see how they usually live. They're usually hanging out in the cattails, hiding barely, from view. There's no way I would have gotten this, but this is an invasive species, this plant. It's called Phragmites. It grows to be 20 feet tall. And so I cut them all down. And so now that I cut them all down, I could see the bird. But, under normal circumstances, I never would have gotten pictures of the bird in the middle there. All right, so we have a number of different species of wren that live here.
Excuse me?
Just one quick thought on the times of year. Winter wrens we'll probably only see here in winter. House wrens we could see here all year. Marsh wrens only in summer. But the Carolina wren could go either way. They don't like the cold, but they try. So if this is a mild winter, their range will extend northward, and we could have them with us all winter. But then if we get a harsh winter, then we won't see them, and then their range will end here. So we're right about at the place where it's a little too cold for them to stand some years, but not other years. And so, here among the four wrens, the temperatures they tolerate can be very different. I'm sorry, did someone at home have a question?
Yes. What did you say about taking the pictures of the marsh wrens and saying that they were shy? What do you mean?
So some birds, if they're going to make a call, like if the male is going to make a call, like this is my territory, I'm trying to attract a female, will be on a branch where all can see it. So, it's advertising in that sense. These birds will just hide in the middle of the cattails. You can hear them, but you can't see them. Some birds, if you go up and you do this, psh, 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 they'll say, wait, someone's in my territory. Let me go investigate. And then they'll come close and you can see like, oh, I can get a good picture now, or I can identify it with my binoculars. They don't do that. So they will just flit in and among all of this vegetation, and you probably wouldn't get a good view of them. The question was, what did I mean by saying they were shy? Here is another bird that winter's your best time, and they're really cute. So they're small. And if you're looking for cues, if you're a beginner birder, little cues like that. So some birds are small, but smaller than a sparrow. If you see something that's smaller than a sparrow, you've really got a short list of things it could be. There's kinglets, there's blue-gray gnatcatchers, and there's hummingbirds, and wrens, and you're getting close to the end of your list. All right, so you've just really, narrowed down the possibilities by just noticing that, not just size, but smaller than a sparrow. So if there's birds that I know sparrows, I know robins or blue jays, I know crows, I know red-tailed hawks. Use them as kind of reference points when you see a bird, like, oh, I saw a bird, because, a cedar waxwing, for example, that's a bigger bird. That's, blue jay size. All right, so it had a crest on its head, but it's blue jay size. That would really help you narrow it down. So golden crown kinglets, small. Here you can see the nice little gold crown. Males will have more of an orange, and it can be raised. All right, so males in courtship, can raise this nice little orange crown they have in the middle of their heads. So that's kind of a neat thing. You're not likely to see them in their breeding range. Most of them breed north of us in Canada and the northern US, but they like the tops of trees. They never stop moving. So, you know, little tiny birds which are 40 feet up, you're just not going to see. Even here it's challenging. So here, like the narration in the video is saying how challenging it is to take pictures of little birds that stay in the underbrush because your camera doesn't know where to focus, etc. But still, this winter will be your best time to see the golden crown kinglets, because rather than being at the tops of trees, they'll probably be in bushes, and they'll probably be in groups. During the breeding season, they're probably just in mating pairs. But now to keep warm, you could see like a small group of them in some bushes which are around uh, you know eye height. And so once again, this is a good time to see this bird if you had to pick a time. And I just have videos here. I took some at the Bashak. I took some at two of the Audubon sanctuaries, one in Warwick, one here. Once again, photography is tough, so it's challenging. But just your camera will focus on something. But will it be the little tiny bird, or will it be the branch that's right in front of the bird, the branch that's right behind the bird? And by that time, the bird will have moved. So, so kudos if you're going to um, get into photography, but also just like going out in nature should be relaxing. I don't know about anyone else because like I've come home so frustrated some days, like, oh, like I saw so many good birds, but just couldn't get the picture. I focused on the branch right in front of it and just probably doing it wrong. If you come home and you're like, oh, I need to relax after my nature walk. Um, okay. Yes. TJ, you had a question?
Yeah, the golden crown kinglet, is it also called a Tweety bird? Am I mistaken?
Ooh. So I don't know. Just being old, I associate Tweety Bird with, a cartoon. So you and I,
Oh
there's a
yeah.
generation between us. I'm sure there's a difference. The problem with common names is your question, like, can it be called a Tweety Bird? With common names, you can call anything anything. Like flickers have, I think, 20 different names if you go to different parts of the world. I don't know that that's I haven't heard that term, Tweety Bird, but could be, could be.
Because I heard something like that on Wildcrafts when I was younger,
Okay.
like a lot younger.
Okay, could very well be. Could very well be. Once again, that's the thing with common names. I know a handful of scientific names, but like really good birders or botanists. Like I say, oh, what type of goldenrod is that? The broadleaf goldenrod? Is that the early flowering rod? It's like no, that's Solidago something something. Like it just don't even bother with the common name. Just do the scientific. And I get how that gives you a far superior identification, but I mostly use common names, but that would be a disadvantage that there could be lots of common names. We together as a group could make up a new common name for any of the birds we see. Next group of birds, the blackbirds, the family Icteridae. The red-winged blackbirds are perhaps the ones we think of first. And obviously their names, indicate the nice red and yellow bars that the males have during courtship. But as you saw there, it's calling, and as it's calling, notice it's also then fluffing up its wings and showing these off for the females primarily. Like it's saying, hey females, this is my territory, here I am. And being as loud as it can, as showy as it can as well. All right. Da-da-da-da. I'm sorry, let me just go to one other bird for a second. So there's just pictures of wrens. Oh, come on, jump into my view. Does anyone, before we go any further, does anyone know what this bird is? Yes. Ooh, so you're right on the first part. So this is also a red-winged blackbird. This is the female. So just that's something I struggle with. I love scarlet tanagers that we'll be talking about. I don't know if I've ever seen a female. They're actually green. their coloration, like a brownish green. And there are a bunch of birds like that. I'm not proud to say that, but the males brightly colored and they're showy. They're going to sit on a branch and announce themselves with a song. The females, they're camouflaged to blend in and they stay nice and quiet. There are a lot of birds that I think I know very well, but I think I only know half of them. I don't know if I'm that familiar with the females. And so these are female red-winged blackbirds. You can even see like a little tinge of red, on some of those. And while the males are defending a territory, the females are often then caring for the nest. There'll be 2 weeks sitting on the eggs, and then maybe about another 2 weeks feeding the young. So since their nest can sometimes be on the ground or close to the ground, sometimes on higher reeds, you want to be camouflaged. You don't want to be showy because that would just attract potential nest predators to where you have to laid your eggs. Now, while they're caring for the young, it does take a bit of work to defend your nest against potential predators. So I mentioned I was cutting all those tall weeds this summer, right? And this is what you can find in some of them where this was well hidden until, I decided I only saw the nest until I already chopped off the half. I leave the tall reeds around as many of these I can. These are baby red-winged blackbirds in their open cup-shaped nests. All right, so the young will spend here about 2 weeks. And in this same area, like literally like 20 yards away, on a different day, I got these. So here's the red-winged blackbird annoyed that, I'm cutting down its weeds. But then 20 yards away on a different day, I saw this. Now, this is a red-shouldered hawk, and these are red-winged blackbirds. And the red-winged blackbirds are attacking it. And you think, well, that's kind of dumb to attack a hawk. But that's what they do. And it's a behavior called mobbing. A bunch of birds will do it, where they'll just go after big birds, especially birds of prey, and just heckle them to the point where they leave the area. Could the hawk, if it really tried, maybe prey on a red-winged blackbird? Maybe, but it would take an awful lot of time and energy. The red-winged blackbirds are pecking at them as they fly over. They're a little more maneuverable. This red-shouldered hawk just got something. I don't know what it is. Maybe a snail or something. It's got something in its talons. It just wants to go and eat, but these birds are just dive bombing it. And so it's probably going to just go and vacate the area and say, this just isn't worth my trouble. And the reason they did that is because of this, all right? Because if the hawk flies over this wetland enough times, they're going to see an open cup nest, and that's, easy pickings. But if the males just heckle them until no birds of prey come anywhere nearby, then their, more of their offspring will be successful. So then while that was going on, here was the female staying with the nest, staying close to the ground, better camouflage. The males are going to spend an awful lot of time defending the area. Let me just finish my last red-winged blackbird, I think. So in this, songbirds often do not mate for life. Red-winged blackbirds don't. And so after this season, this couple may not be together. In fact, even during this season, because the male is going to defend a territory. He may have 2 females within the territory, 5 females in the territory. The females in his territory that he's defending might mate with other males so that the young, the nest had mixed parentage. And there could even then, some red-winged blackbird males observe that there's this one defending a big territory that these females are in. They'll sneak into a territory that they're not defending, mate with any, accepting females, and then leave. So, they get the privilege of mating without, the defense of a territory. So there's a lot of things going on there. Yes, you had a question.
The general question. Is it true or is it a falsehood that if you pick up a baby bird out of the nest and put it back with its mother?
I think it can be true. In many cases, So I don't know that someone has done a study that like every single bird species or this, and I would then always be careful in trying to say like, here's something that applies to all birds, because the minute I say anything, it's wrong because I can think of an exception or someone else can think of an exception. I'll bet you that would be the case where some birds are better at that than others. So like, just getting to cowbirds, which we'll talk about. Some birds know that's not my baby, that's a foreign invader of my nest that they will then kill. Or yellow warblers, actually, if their young and a cowbird young, maybe just the eggs, I don't know if the young. But anyway, they'll then build a second nest on top of that, squishing their eggs, but they squish the parasite as well. So they can tell that's not my egg, and here's what we do. Whereas other birds are oblivious. And so I don't know, but I imagine that there might be some birds which are very good at, sensing interference, and maybe others not quite as good. And if anyone else had comments on that, I saw a couple people nodding, or feel free to chime in.
Wait, you talked about some birds crushing the eggs of an intruder?
Yes. So they're warblers. So I was going to show you a yellow warbler nest next time, but just quickly, tell you what, that we're in the blackbirds, and this relates to 4 blackbirds from now. So if you don't mind, I'll answer your question in 4 birds when we get to this one. So when Europeans came to the Americas and saw this bird, they were struck by 2 things. One, they look like the orioles in Europe. Now they're not, and they're not closely related, but they do look like them. And so when they called them the Baltimore Orioles, they were, comparing them to a bird they knew, even though, it turns out they weren't closely related. And somewhere, I'm not as good with, English lineages as I should be, there was a Lord Baltimore whose coat of arms was orange. And so between the two, they said, a great name for this bird would be the Baltimore Oriole. They're orange like Lord Baltimore's coat of arms, and they look like Orioles. So that's how they got the name. Now, it turns out there are a bunch of Orioles, and there was a bit of a flap as we wonder how best to classify the natural world. Sometimes new data comes to light and forces you to reconsider stuff. And so there was the question, can they interbreed and live in the same territory as the Bullock's Oriole? In which case, are these 2 variants of the same species? So there was a while where everyone was being told, don't call it the Baltimore Oriole, that's not a real name, it's just a subgroup of the Bullock's Oriole. And then a subsequent study came out and said, yeah, I think we were right the first time, separating them again. And that's frustrating, and I'm sure you find it frustrating. But it's also, that's what makes science strong. That if new evidence comes to light, I admit I'm wrong, and we change. Like there are, areas in the human experience where people don't do that quite as much. And the fact that we're ready to, even though like I was wrong, I'll change. Oh, it turns out I was right the first time, I'll change back. As annoying as that is, I think it's also a strength of science. And the goal is that, every year we're getting at least a little closer to an accurate understanding of the natural world. These Baltimore Orioles are wonderful in spring. They're bright colors, and their songs. However, just like the female red-winged blackbird, you may have seen female and juvenile Baltimore Orioles without noticing them. All right, so this, I believe, is a female. It could be a juvenile. It could be a juvenile female. So they would be more of a yellowish color, more of a drab, once again, blending in. This can change over time. Females could become more orange as they age, not quite as orange as the males, but nevertheless, get more orange over time. But once again, every now and then you'll see a bird that's actually a bird that It's just, either a stage of the life cycle or a gender of the bird that maybe you don't know as well. So those are Baltimore Orioles. I just saw the red-winged blackbird and think of it. Oh, that's cool. Cool. Comment was that they've seen red-winged blackbirds, mob birds in their yard. Okay. So grackles can be beautiful birds, but you have to catch the light just right. So they have a bright yellow iris, and the colors on them. All right, so that one just looks they're called the blackbirds, this family, and that one just looks like a black bird. But if you catch it in the light, just the iridescence of the colors can really be something. Now, at different times of the year and different lights, you maybe wouldn't get that. But grackles, somewhere. These can travel in groups in autumn, and that's the problem where red-winged blackbirds in autumn, they're not going to show off their red and their yellow. And then you've got grackles, and then you've got two of the other ones we're about to say. So you can see a flock of blackbirds. They could actually be different species that just are all traveling together. So sometimes it's easy to assume I saw a couple red-winged blackbirds, and I assume they all are, but actually it might be a little bit more of a varied group. Okay. This is, we love birds, but if we were to say there was one that we don't love, it would be this one. This is a brown-headed cowbird. So it's a blackbird. And the problem is, this isn't where it's supposed to live. It's supposed to live out west. But out west, it finds more open spaces, prairies and the like. But as people moved into this area, we cut a lot of trees down. Now, one of the things I struggle with, because I always like to say, like, oh, I'm out in the woods, I'm out in the forest, I'm out in nature. But if anyone's ever had the privilege to be in virgin forest, it's hard. You know, because you walk up to a tree and every other one is this wide. Right? Like we're in woods, but we're not, very rarely are we in woods this much. East of the Mississippi, the Adirondacks have a couple of patches like that. Smoky Mountain National Park has smaller sections like that. And that's about it. So if you want to see what forests look like on the East Coast, there's virtually nowhere you can go where you can find trees the way that trees were meant to be. So as we cut these down, then birds which would never have thought of living east of the Mississippi because it wasn't the right habitat, all of a sudden said, ooh, look at all of this open space. I can do that. So we have the brown-headed cowbird. They lay their eggs in the nest. So here's the male, there's the female. They lay their eggs in the nest of other birds and then leave. And they leave then the other birds to care for their young. And not only is that bad, but these big blackbird, I mean, they're cowbird, but they're in the blackbird family. These big blackbird young in, say, the nest of a warbler, kick out the little birds that belong there. And so that now that the adults are only caring for the cowbird young. And a lot of our bird numbers, which are declining, this is a major contributing factor where a quarter to up to half of all of the nestlings which would have, successfully been raised, are taken, or are lost because of cowbirds. This is what's called brood parasitism, a type of parasitism. And as we cut down areas in this area, we make it easier for them to survive. And here's an example. Let's say you have this big area that's wooded and you say, what would be cool? Let's just put a road through the middle, put houses on either side. Well, the forest birds, like a scarlet tanager, was in the middle of the forest, never had to worry about cowbirds because it's in the middle of the woods and cowbirds don't like that. But once the road goes through and you've got, these lawns that are on either side, now the cowbirds can be in the open spaces and can now reach at least some of the tree area. You've opened up a big tract of the birds that lived in the forest to brood parasitism by the cowbirds. Some birds are okay at recognizing the cowbirds and will kick them out. All right. The yellow warblers I had mentioned will actually build nest on top of nest and can actually make tiers, I think up to like 5 or 6 layers of them. In a season, and some of the birds eat so much fruit that the cowbirds don't do well. But this is a problem. And if you ask, well, why don't the birds recognize the cowbirds? Well, the answer is they will. I mean, there's an advantage in recognizing your offspring versus the cowbirds. They'll get there, but evolution doesn't work quickly. We've just cut down the trees in this area in the past couple centuries. It's really only been 200 years that East Coast birds have had to deal with cowbirds. And that's not a whole lot of time for populations to change in that way. So a lot of the changes that humans impose on these birds just happen so fast that wildlife can adapt, but they can't adapt to so many different things in such a short span of time. One more blackbird. Oh, I'm sorry, two more that we'll see are this is a bobolink throughout much of the year. All right, so those are pretty birds. All right, you'll find them in meadows. But then the males can take on this breeding plumage, where that's the same bird. All right, but just looking much, different with this bright yellow head and the bright black, etc. I know the Audubon Society was petitioning this one landowner that they were going to mow their fields. Could you just wait and put it off like a couple of weeks until this, because these are ground nesting birds, and if you're going to just mow this big field, you're probably going to get a lot of their nest too if you just left it a little longer. Just as an example of little things that we could do. That's just like, oh, let me put off mowing for 2 weeks, and now this whole set of bobolinks might
Survive.
might survive.
Mhm.
Now, I've been birding for years and years, but I still see new birds. That vireo I mentioned, I saw on Friday. That was the first one I've seen in my life. This was a couple weeks ago. I noticed this one. I'd never seen this before. Here's a blackbird, and you say, oh, okay, it's a cowbird, or it's a red-winged blackbird, or it's a grackle, or who knows, maybe it's a starling. I'll talk about those next. But then you look close and you're like, wait, those colors look a little weird. Oh, that's a new one. That's a rusty blackbird. All right. So that's sometimes of interest to, look at every bird where you say, oh, there's a bunch of mallards, and you look close and you're like, no, there's a couple of different things in there. That's not just all mallards or not just all this. So not only is it, I kind of like that I saw a new species of blackbird, but also apparently their numbers are dropping really fast. Like a lot of birds are. North America has lost a quarter of its birds since 1950. So in general, birds numbers are going down, but some are going down faster. And this would be one of the examples. We're not quite sure why. And so that I've read, if you see a rusty blackbird and you're, do I go onto eBird and note the observations I've made today or not? On that one, yeah, they would like to, we'd like to count the rusty blackbirds. We're concerned about those. Yeah.
We've lost a quarter of the birds to be a quarter of the species or a quarter of
Individuals. So there was and the Audubon Society helped with this, so I thought that was a really cool thing. And it was published, you know what? Oh, everyone's gonna be so mad at you. There's a song. Okay, let me get to the song, but the song has the paper if you're interested. I was gonna bring this up in future ones, but since you practically begged me to play it. I'll play it soft because I know sometimes the
1, 2, 3, 4, don't see as many birds anymore.
So this is the journal Science, which when we get to prestigious scientific journals, this is one of the top ones. And there's this huge study, the most thorough of its kind, that looked at all of this data across North America, where we've lost a quarter of our birds. And this would be numbers. So
the 1953 billion birds.
So if you were alive in 1950 and going out in the wild, North America would have had 3 billion more birds flying around than it does now.
Wow.
That's cardinals, that's sparrows, that's a little bit of everything. So we're not worried about cardinals aren't going extinct, sparrows aren't going extinct, but everyone's numbers are going down. So that's certainly a concern, and we can mention this later because we will get to environmental issues. One of the things that concerns me is, like, in 1950, that predates me a little bit. But when I was born in 1966, I used to know this. Oh, sorry. No, I wanted like human population, I believe I think it was 3.4 billion when I was born. 1950 would have been under 3. All right. There are now 8. So the thing that concerns me, and this can be a topic for a future conversation, is if North America has lost a quarter of its birds starting in the 70 years in which we had, under 3 billion people. What do the next 70 years hold when we're starting with 8? All right. Once again, a conversation for another day, but whether the rusty blackbird or any of these, yeah, we're worried. I mean, just, the impacts on the natural world are coming in hard and fast, and the natural world's hard to adjust to those. Starlings are not blackbirds. They're in a different family, but they look like them, so I don't deal with them now. They're from the old world, while blackbirds are from the new world. So blackbirds are American, while if you go to South America, a lot of blackbirds there. Whereas these have been transported from Europe. Now, they're an invasive species. And so, clearly I have thoughts about invasive species. All right. However, just a couple of, somewhere I got pictures of starlings. Oh, yeah, they're in a different family. I'm sorry. Oh, there we go. So if you look at them right, I mean, they can actually be quite pretty. They have some iridescence colors. In winter, some spotting. Now, you might not notice it, so the juveniles, notice the brown heads. All right,
Yeah.
so, there can be some variation based on age. But then another thing you might notice is this. One, they're fairly comfortable with human habitation, so you can find them in cities. But then also you can find them in huge groups so big that there's a name. The name is murmuration.
Huh.
So if you go to Goshen, this is from last winter, there are days you walk around, you don't really see many birds. There's some, a couple sparrows here and there, but it's winter. The number of birds have decreased. But then you look up in the tree and you count and you're like, oh, okay, now my birds count up into thousands.
Mhm.
So there are days where this is the most abundant bird that you'll see, outnumbering all other birds. So once again, they're an invasive species and not my favorite, but nevertheless, if we're talking about biodiversity, they're certainly having an impact on the ecosystem. And it certainly is a wonder to see how they change direction all at once. And I'm sure you've had that experience where it's almost like, like orchestrated how they follow each other and react to each other. And that in and of itself is a fascinating question. But you can just see how thousands and thousands of these birds act together. Also, not only do they look a little different in winter, but they don't do this in summer. So, birds can change behavior over the course of the year. Yes, Megumi.
Is there an explanation for why they swarm like
Hey,
this?
I'm
So
sorry. Hold
high?
on just a second. We have a question here. Oh, I heard a different story. Finish your story. I have a funnier one. Oh, I'm sorry. And I heard what I was listening to someone online. No, that is true. We could argue whether they were the first ones to introduce the starlings, but certainly one of the first introductions into starlings was by a Shakespeare group saying that the Americas should have every bird mentioned in Shakespeare. So, I think the question is, was it the very first, or was it just one of the first helping? But you're certainly right. Yeah, that is a funny story. And true. I'm sorry, did someone have a question online? The question here, if you didn't hear it, was starlings were introduced from Europe, and they were introduced in part because they were mentioned in Shakespeare's works, and there was a group of Shakespeare fans making a point to introduce all of those. Okay, we're almost on the list of birds. We want to get to the cardinals and their friends. But here, tanagers, everyone, people in here, we've seen tanagers and we like tanagers? Yes? Okay. No, it turns out. Remember how I said that, we can reclassify things? It turns out the scarlet tanager is not a tanager. It's a cardinal. Oh, and there are some cardinals which are now tanagers. And if you know about Darwin going to the Galapagos and studying finches, they're not finches, they're tanagers. So as we study DNA, sometimes the groups that birds seem to belong to based on their genetic relationships are different than what you would have put them in by looking, like these things look like other finches, I'll name them finches. They look at this. So we don't have tanagers here. So I should go on because this is a lecture about Orange County birds. However, I do want to say tanagers are among the most abundant birds in the world in terms of number of species. If you were to say, let's take bird families, how many of them have more than 300 species in them? There aren't many. All right, hummingbirds would be one. Tanagers would be a second. There aren't that many. So tanagers are very species rich. They include this thing. I've seen it in South America. I think you can see it in Florida as well, but I wouldn't swear by that. This is a cardinal, the red-crested cardinal. It's not a cardinal, it's a tanager. This is the yellow-billed cardinal, also a tanager. And then at the Galapagos, these are, quote, Darwin's finches. They are actually tanagers. So tanagers are wonderful. They're worth a talk of their own, but we're running low on time, and none of them actually live in Orange County. The scarlet tanager, it is, genetically speaking, a cardinal. This is what the males look like. Females, like I said, they're almost green in their color, and I don't even know if I've ever seen one. But as you might imagine, they like the tops of trees. If you're green and you like the tops of trees and you're not making a courtship song, you might not notice those. But the males, they make a very distinctive call, and just their brilliant bright red helps you identify them. Once again, birds don't make red pigments in their bodies, they eat them. So the scarlet tanager eats this, incorporates them into its feathers, but then the males are showing off to the females, look how well I eat. I wouldn't be this red if it wasn't for the fact that I was eating all of these, this plant material with the red carotenoid pigments in it. So females are getting an idea of how healthy their potential partners are. And not just in that scarlet tanager, which is a cardinal, but also then in the northern cardinal here. Here are the females. All right, obviously they're getting some of their red pigment from their diet, but males put much more inside. They have these crests, like all other birds with crests, they can raise them and lower them. All right. And, very distinct. Look how healthy that male is. You see how bright red a female would say, that's a good potential partner. Also, another thing here is the birds which we're going to end with tonight. Look at those beaks. So while birds can eat a lot of things, the next bird has even a thicker beak, but it eats a lot of bugs. I mean, bugs are around. It's a good source of protein. Eat the bugs. But then there are times of year where bugs aren't around. And you saw pictures of the cardinal in winter, and you can get seeds that many other birds can't digest because they're just too thick. And so having a thick beak certainly is an advantage. Here's a cousin of the cardinal, also in the group, called the rose-breasted grosbeak. Nice red patch on its otherwise white chest, a black head on the males. Females look a little more drab. All right, once again, color. Here we can see it. Somewhere I'll get it. Maybe it's in one of my pictures. I'll get the picture. Once again, it has a very thick, beak, as this seed-eating group does. Somewhere, cardinal. Okay. So if you were to look at that, look how thick that bill is. Just allows them to eat lots of plant material that many birds can't. Okay. We have other birds like this. There are finches. So here is the house finch, also kind of invasive species. In the early 1900s, these were brought from California to be sold in pet stores on the East Coast, and they got loose. And so now we have house finches in the wild as of the 1940s. All right. We have another species known as the goldfinch. All right. During breeding season, it's easy to identify the males. The females have more yellow on them. All right. So that's a goldfinch as well. That's a female. So perhaps a little harder to recognize than the male. And that's a goldfinch in winter. Goldfinches stay with us all throughout the year, but they might be harder to recognize in winter without that bright yellow coloration. Certainly at this time of the year, they're looking like this, but we'll also have a lot in winter as well. I'll go back to the videos in a second. Also in this group of seed eaters is a beautiful blue bird, but it likes forests, so you might not see it. This is the indigo bunting. Okay, the Liberty Loop on the Jersey border is a nice place to see indigo buntings. As I've said before, birds don't make blue colors for their feathers. It's how the structure of the feather reflects light. So these are beautiful, but you'll notice something about it. It's a nice sunny day. This one on the left, you'll get an idea, like a little cloudier. The blue's not quite as brilliant. If it was darker, you might not notice the blue color, all right, because it's, once again, not a pigment, but how the light is interacting. And on cloudy days, you're just not going to get the same appreciation for these birds. All right, so just I'm going to show videos of a couple of these. So here's the goldfinch. All right, so you can see that the nice male, the coloration there. But if you were to look here, I guess this one, there are two goldfinches there. There's the male, there's the female. All right, and so it's easier to miss those. But then once again, that's the idea. You know, the female wants to be, you know, camouflage and not attracting a predator's gaze as much. Notice there's no leaves on the trees in winter, early spring. Goldfinches don't look quite as brilliant. There's just, once again, those indigo buntings. We went on a bird walk this summer in the Liberty Loop, and we just saw so many. And we saw a bunch of these. There was really a treat to see those. Very often they like trees, and so they're around, but they're in the forest and they're higher in trees, and you're not going to get a good view of them.
Testing began.
I'm sorry, someone saying something?
Irish security agency warns of efforts to sow doubt and chaos.
Okay, thank you. Just two last birds I just have pictures of. We have different kinds of kinglets. In addition to the golden crown, there's a ruby crown kinglet. They would be more impressive during breeding season. The males could flash a red head. And then the last bird for tonight is the rufous-sided towhee, which makes two calls. If you hear towhee, that's all. But then also something that a lot of people feel is saying, drink your tea. So, you know, birds can make different kinds of calls. You get the idea that there's a rufous-sided towhee, although the females would lack the black and be just more brownish in general. Now, just personal experience, I was talking to Dr. Zorovjek, who in the biology department, he's the bird expert. That's his special field. And I was just saying, you know what? Just this past season, there are two birds that I don't think I've seen once. The black-throated blue warblers, which I love. I don't think I've seen one this year. And I said, you know what? I think I've maybe heard a towhee or two, but I don't think I've seen them. So these two birds, unusual. And he said, you know what? Come to think of it, I don't know if I've seen or heard those either. And I'm just mentioning that because we citizen scientists, we don't know what's going on in the natural world with warmer than average temperatures, drier than average temperatures, you know, all of these other things. Some of these birds not really being even impacted by what's going on here, but they go to the Caribbean or South America or Central America or the Southeast. Deforestation there or the pet trade there might be taking a toll on their numbers, you know, without really anything changing here. There's so many things going on. If you were to ask what's going to happen in 5 years, 10 years, the answer, we don't know. We just have to always just be on the lookout and just keep watching. And this is where, you know, there's roles for all of us to play, like all of us looking at what comes with the backyard feeders, this trail that I always walk my dog in. I've seen it change over the years. I've been taking pictures. Here's some of the things I've done. So, you know, if you were to at the end of the year, the Audubon Society helps with a Christmas bird count where we all go out to the same areas every year and just what species do we see each year. And then, you know, that study that I showed in the song where after gathering all of this data, you can start to notice trends. But you know, if you get into bird watching, every day you can say, I'm going to log into eBird and just put in what I saw, and they're watching. Like on Friday, I said I saw 194 green-winged teals, and they came back with that's far too high. And I said, well, here's all my pictures. But people are looking at and counting with the ideas like, what are we seeing? What trends are out there? So you know, the natural world is certainly changing. We would welcome, you know, your help in helping to document that. Megumi, you had a question. Mm-hmm.
One of the first ones I actually know.
Mm-hmm.
I always knew this season a lot fewer. And the other day I heard the white
Mhm.
For the first time this season.
Wow, wow. Well, we will see them more over winter. We will see them more over winter, but I have not seen them as often in the summer as I'm used to. And maybe that was, just me and where I've been. It's also been so dry, like it has been crazy dry at the wetlands. So what effects that had, I don't know. Yeah.
Separate but related topic that I think we could all do to our personal part in encouraging birds is by planting native plants in our yards.
Mhm.
Like providing food for them. That's just like a small thing that really helps if a lot of people did that.
That would be great. Now, I was going to get into this on a future. No, on a future occasion. This is a great idea because at the sanctuary over here, there's all these berry bushes. There's the dogwoods, which are native. Oh, but you see autumn olive, they produce all the berries. You see the buckthorn tree, they produce all these berries. That's good for birds as well. Not as good though. Like if birds are like looking for nutrition, the native dogwoods, that's what they need. That's the great food. These other things, not as nutritious. And the birds are actually making it worse because when they're hungry, all right, because there's autumn olive, they'll eat the autumn olive, but now they'll defecate all of the seeds. So now in the future, there will be more autumn olive and less of the dogwoods. Now that was an excellent point. Not only should we plant more, but even when the other, invasives have berries, very often they're not as, nutritious as the ones that we would have given. For everyone who's here, thank you so very much for coming. It's been a joy to see you. And once again, I would, if there's any ideas that you have, this was kind of like a new idea. We think we're going to try to put together like a similar series with different topics for the spring. But I would actually love it if we had a day that was all about you sharing your stories about the birds you've seen or pictures you've taken, etc. So I'll maybe try to do one at the end of this year. But if that's something that you would like to, please, or any other ideas, please let me know. This is wonderful. We'd love to do more of it. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, have a wonderful evening. Next week is the last in our series of bird groups before we get into like environmental issues and food chains and seasons. So next week will be sparrows and warblers.
Excuse me?
You're going to meet on November 6th,
So I think that one is the 6.5 station sanctuary. So where that is if you're driving 17M towards Goshen, and there's the big Healy dealership there. Then the road there at the light is called 6.5 Station Road. If you make a left as if you're going to the car dealership, a quarter mile in is where the Heritage Trail crosses, and you can park, and that's where we'll meet. What time it says here? 5 o'clock to 6:30.
Before the prison, right?
Yes. Yeah. So the Audubon Sanctuary is on the right of the road. The prison's on the left. So park where you can see. Excuse me, the prison. Thank you so very much for coming.
Mr.
I'm
John.
16, 20. Okay, I'm sorry, Dorothy. What'd you say? Oh, yeah. Okay. As you go, feel free to go if you've had enough, but otherwise, here are just some of the songs of the birds we've heard tonight. And I know that people at home, you've said that sometimes you can't hear this as well, which is why I put it off to the end. So here's the red-winged blackbird.
Professor John,
Yes.
what's going to happen to the class after the next week?
Oh, we will still have talks. It's no longer like different groups of birds. We'll talk about like birds in different habitats and stuff. So if you were to go online, you can see all of the topics for upcoming weeks. We still go on. The class isn't ending.
Oh, okay. So are we gonna go with the OCAS sanctuary updates since it only goes up to topic 10 online?
Okay, I'm kind of building some of this as we go. There will be more information as we get a little closer.
Okay.
So here's the Carolina wren, this one. So some people think that's tea kettle, or. Now notice, like, if you say like, oh, tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle, I know that one. And then you hear that last sound, you're thinking, oh, that's a different bird. Unfortunately, birds can make more than one. It would be nice if they could just stick to one and make it easier for us, but. Now, here's just a little hint. How do you remember all of these? Well, I haven't mastered it, so I'm not going to be. But that last part, if you've watched goldfinches fly, they'll flutter and then coast. And while they coast, they drop a little bit and then flutter and then coast a little bit. And so what someone said that this last part sounds like forgot to flap, which you're like, oh, that's what it looks like. So right here. Forgot to flap. And you're like, oh, I can visualize that. Okay, so, little things like that. House wrens are these tiny, tiny birds, but very musical.
Mr. John,
Yes.
to what you're saying about birds and their sounds, how they sound like other things. To me, a blue heron sounds like a bulldog or some other kind of dog. It does, like a blue heron.
Well, you're right. So they are not in the songbird group. So birds that aren't in the songbird group, really not all that good at making songs. So this is the
sounds like
one
a
you're
bulldog.
not as likely to see, but you just 20,000 songs a day in the trees above you. So it was a red-eyed vireo and the warbling vireo just kind of warbles in and out.
Goodbye.
Okay, goodbye. Thanks for coming, TJ.
Oh, have a good Halloween.
Oh, you too. You too.
Have a good Halloween.
And then one more from tonight. Here's the golden crown kinglet. Okay, so we'll see you next week. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Goodbye. Yeah. Yeah. They can look a little, but if you were looking at the size, purple martins are related to swallows, so their body shape and their size would be a little more similar to the swallows.
Okay.
Oh, also,
Yeah.
Professor John,
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
you noticed I was here on the week that we're talking about owls and woodpeckers, right?
Uh-huh.
You noticed that, right? I'm not
I
marked
did.
as absent.
Yep.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't marked absent.
You weren't.
Okay. Have a
Good
nice
night, everybody.
and have a happy Halloween.
You too. Yes.
Cowbird?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, the cowbird.
Because I struggle with these, my thoughts were that I would just make a subset as opposed to, like all of the ones we do.